Hello investors, traders, and Market Club members everywhere. Adam Hewison here, co-founder of Market Club with your weekend update for Friday, the 7th of February. So has the market made a turnaround? Are stocks going higher? That's a big question mark. We're going to be looking at several major stocks today, also the indices in crude oil and gold and so forth, and the dollar. So let's get started right away. What we're looking at right now on the chart is a candlestick chart of Apple Computer. Now, Apple just came out and announced they bought $15 billion worth of stock on a buyback, and the market, it did push the market higher, absolutely. But look, if you look and see where we are on the weekly charts, it still doesn't look that good. This is the week's action right here, and it still doesn't really say, wow, buy me, buy me. I think it's going to take a while. You've seen the declining momentum, which we've talked about right here. It just, I don't know, I want to be long Apple, I want to be bullish on Apple. Our trade triangles right here, the monthly is definitely positive, indicating a price going higher. The weekly, on the other hand, is going down, so it means you should be in a neutral, sort of out-of-the-way position right now in Apple. And I think that's the key thing to remember. Plus, you've had this, obviously, this trend line that created a real problem here. So Apple may have to do a lot more work before it goes up, if it's going to go back up. It has to come out with a new product in my mind. So let's see how that plays out in the market. So moving on, Walt Disney also came out with really good earnings. Their movie Frozen did extremely well in the quarter, and we've had a nice big bounce up in the stock. It's up actually for the week about almost 4%, so it's looking good. Did not make a new high, however. This is the important thing to remember. Moved up, failed to make a new high by just a couple of points, and I think next week is going to be a very, very key week for Disney. So let's see how that plays out, and we'll go on to the next market. A lot of these are going to be dependent on next week, but here's one that isn't, and that's Netflix. Netflix, new highs, new high weekly close, definitely looks good. You remember Carl Icahn got out right around here somewhere, and his son said to stay in. Well, I guess the son was right in this case. It's really done very, very well for Carl. 424.85 last trade, looking good on Netflix. Very overbought, however, that's the way it is, but it's still a very strong trend in Netflix. Now looking at Starbucks. Starbucks has been coming down from the high 82 level all the way down to below 70, down to maybe about 69. It bounced up this week. It's closing up about 3%. It's not out of the woods yet, in my opinion. It's below the line, the 50 line, which is not a good sign, in my opinion, for this stock. You can see, oops, you can see right here below 50, and you can see the market really, even this week's action, it really just sort of recovered some of the lost ground it's had in the last several weeks. So let's see how Starbucks moves next week. Also, one of the concerns for Starbucks has got to be the rising price of raw commodities, and that's coffee. So let's see how it plays out. Yahoo actually closed out the week with a small positive note of 2%. However, look, for the last 3 weeks prior to that, it got pummeled. And I think that's the key thing to remember. It's down, obviously, did not go below the 50 line, and I think that's a positive for the stock. Next week is going to be very important. I think we'll see more jiggles and wiggles here on Yahoo. I just don't think we're going to see the stock go all the way up. I think it still has a crisis identity, and that's going to be the key thing. Triangles are basically, we're still positive longer term. Intermediate term is negative, indicating you should be on the sidelines in this stock. Looking at gold, you can see gold actually is just sort of meandering sideways here. We've been looking at a weekly chart. We're going all the way back to this, 2012. So it really hasn't moved any, but it's still creating that base that we've talked about in the market, and that is we've sort of seen this sort of potential double bottom right here, trying to get the market to move up again. And I think if we can get this market to close over 1267 on a weekly basis, that's $1,267 on a weekly basis, I think that will begin to see this market catapult and go higher. So I still think there's a lot of problems that haven't been looked at right now, and that is you've got Puerto Rico, really a major problem there with the bonds funding there. You've got the funding of the government. You've got unemployment still not good in this country, and a lot of other areas we can touch on and take time with. But the reality is the market tells you the truth, and you go with the flow in the market and not what necessarily the fundamentals are saying at the time. So let's move on. This is the Dow Jones. You can see, let's get a little closer here. You can see we've had a big move up here, a big positive day. We've had a big positive week here, closing up actually about unchanged for the week, but compared to where we were, that's quite a recovery. Nonetheless, the weekly is right flat on the 50 line. If we see it go below the 50 line, we could see more pressure in this market. So I'm not convinced this market's just going to roll up and go much, much higher from here. Pretty much the same picture on the S&P 500, but closing out the week, well, a modest gain of 0.30%, but we've been pummeled here for the last few weeks, so it's not unusual to have some sort of recovery. Not convinced we're going to see this market go totally higher from these levels, but we'll watch the charts and trade triangles, and we'll see what they say. On the NASDAQ, pretty much the same thing there. We're closing out the week unchanged for the week, and that's been very, very overbought, but a lot of it has to do with Apple and the $15 billion buyback from Apple itself buying its own stock back. So that's usually a good sign. On the dollar got pummeled this week. Actually did very well the week before, but this week it's down actually almost 1%, which is a pretty big move in the Forex markets, and I think that's the key thing to look at right now. Lots going to depend on next week and see how these things shape up, but we'll be covering it like a blanket, and if you have any questions, please go to our Q&A section on the blog, and we'll be happy to address those questions and answer them in the best way we can. So till next week, have a great weekend, everyone.